All right, welcome back to Studio C. Mike Mullis here with a dear friend of mine. A lot of you Pirate baseball fans got to know and love Matt Stillwell this weekend as I do. He was the gentleman that gave the great oration there before the Western Carolina game on Sunday. And as I told him, had everybody in his palm until he finished with Go Cats. But he'll explain that and a whole lot more. Matt's tied several different layers to Coach Keith LeClair and the battle against ALS. So Matt's here to tell us a little bit about what he's got going in the battle to beat ALS.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you. Number one, I've been affected by ALS in several different ways, and mainly about Coach LeClair. And so, from the time he was diagnosed, I always tell people that I think we all got to see the man that he truly was, and the strength that he had after he was diagnosed, and the way that he chose to live his life from that point on is nothing short of remarkable. And as time continues to go on, and I've had kids and stuff like that, the impact that Coach has had on my life, and that the space that he holds in my head and my heart, it's every day. And so I decided that I wanted his story to live on. And through his story, I wanted to kind of tell the impact, specifically in college baseball that he's had, that through Coach Leggett that Western Carolina has had, and then all the way that thing is spider webbed out. I kind of wanted to tell all that, but do it through the lens of Coach LeClair and the impact that he is having and has had on me.
So let's go back, Matty, to that impact and the crux of the beginning of the relationship. And I think that's a really interesting and cool part of the story, how deep the roots run with you and Coach. So tell us a little bit about, or as much as you'd like to tell us about, how y'all's relationship began and the evolution in your time at Western. Go with that story. I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah. So, I as a kid, I was watching Western play in Cullowhee, and I was my best friend growing up. His name was Robert Perez, and they all nicknamed him Doggy. He was my best friend, and he was a bat boy for Western. And so every once in a while, he would drag me into the dugout. He didn't have to drag me into it. I was wanting to go. Western was a juggernaut at that time, man, and Coach LeClair was, ringleader of that Southern Conference Player of the Year. His senior year, they won 4 straight Southern Conference tournaments, went to 4 straight regionals, and did well in those. And he was right at the top of that. And so, as a little kid looking up to that, those guys were massive to me. And so that's kind of where that started. And then he did his student teaching at Fairview Elementary, where when I was in 8th grade, is probably where I met him, outside the baseball field. His Lynn and Lynn, his wife, and my mom taught together. And so that started creating something. And then as we got into, as I got into high school, and, baseball really started to take shape for me. I had been going to camps under Coach Leggett and stuff like that. But when it became a reality that I was going to have a chance to play, one of the things that sticks out to me is that Coach LeClair came to recruit me at my basketball practice, which
That's old school.
we it's the best. I was a really probably a 4 sport athlete. I ran track when I could. I didn't practice it, but I would go out and run in meets and stuff like that. And so I was football to basketball to baseball. Baseball kind of all the time, but I always thought that was a really cool thing, and I took pride in the fact that he came to my basketball practice to see how, you know, I guess athletic I was, but I think I've always looked at it more as the mental side of it, the leadership side of it, to see how I did practice, see how I handled my teammates. and I think we learn so much from other sports that help you in baseball specifically, that we have to keep hold of. And I knew that he recognized that in me, and took value in that as a coach when he was recruiting me. So that from that point on, I signed with Western, and came to school, and redshirted. I will say this: he brought us in like first meeting, and you have no idea. You probably do have an idea how many times I've said this as a travel ball parent now. um, First meeting on campus, LeClair brings us into the locker room, and he says, "If I ever hear from your parents about anything, you're done.
That's right.
You're done." And then fast forward to the way our world is today, is that it's just a free for all. There are very few coaches that put their hand down and they're like, "No, we're not going to do that." And so I've quoted that time in my life more times than I care to be honest with you. But he did that, and he handled us really well. And that was kind of the beginning of that next step for me, certainly in baseball and in life for that matter.
Well, and that kind of takes me to my next point. So I know that when you and I talk, and we've talked a lot catching up for a number of years, that we would had just kind of gone on with life. But one of the big things that you go back to constantly is the blue collar nature, the work ethic, the core of the foundation of the philosophy of Keith LeClair, not only on the baseball field, but in life. And so, talk a little bit about where that has taken you. And we're pretty remiss, or I'm remiss as a host here, not to mention that you've made a living as a singer songwriter in music in your time since your baseball career ended. So tell us a little bit about how those things helped you get to the point you are today.
Yeah, as you know, and we're blessed to have been part of this game for a long time, and to play it as long as we did, and um, play summer ball and all the stuff, and what that did for me, the game in itself, it gives you a perspective on life, because it's a game of failure. And the reason that um, I think Coach holds, he, along with my dad, hold a lot of space in my head, a lot. And the vast majority of that has to deal with, are you doing something today to make yourself better? And that deals with work ethic. And I don't ever remember a day that we went to the field that Coach wasn't already there, riding our gator around. Um, he would mow, he would, you know, do everything that he had to the field. There was really no grounds crew. We were the grounds crew, and he, I think, enjoyed that. But I also learned that part of it. Like, work was always fun for me. I like doing it, but I watched him do that too. And he would ride that gator. And those of us that know him, I mean, he would kind of stand up and ride it almost like he was standing up on a bicycle. And he would be chewing his tongue, just crushing the outfield, getting the water off, getting the water off the outfield and stuff like that. And those are the vivid images that I have of him, because he's always at the field before we got there,
Right.
and I think that kind of stuck with me. And so as I transitioned into music, the two things parallel each other in the most specific ways. Failure, number one, you're dealing with no multiple times a day, in every sense. Not, I think some people look at the music industry as like, oh, you got rejected for a record deal, or you got what? No, you're getting it's every day, whether it's shows that they're not, even someone not calling you about a show is a little bit of a rejection. Or if you're in a songwriting room with co-writers and you're throwing out ideas that mean a lot to you, and they don't resonate with the dude or girl you're sitting next to, in that songwriting room, you have to be able to deal with that. That's no different than a bad hop or making an error, striking out, or to be honest with you, it's a little bit more, and you'll probably understand it. Our baseball folks understand. It's more like hitting a freaking missile right at the shortstop. Like
Nothing
you
to
have a
show
great
for it.
and nothing to show for it. You have a great idea in your mind. You have a great idea, and you sit there and you go, all right, um, here it is, and you pour your heart out, and then within 1 second, it's like, I don't think that's what that is. So you have to be able to process that immediately, and the game of baseball teaches you how to do that. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to be successful.
Right.
Um, and in either thing. And so baseball really taught me how to, or it showed me better, more than that, it showed me how to deal with, not just the big no's, but those little ones that you have to deal with all the time and still have confidence enough in yourself to be able to throw that next idea out, or whatever that is. And so there was a lot of that kind of thing that I learned, and just from the game of baseball, and because he was such a big part of my life in that sense, he's always in my head, just in an everyday thing. Now, when you add in, so just that impact is big, right?
Right.
Now let's add in, here's a you know I live in Knoxville now, and so we just had, you know, Tennessee became really good in baseball, and you had Tony Vitello, who hottest coach in the country, and all that kind of stuff. Well, we're in social media, so everybody sees that. I played for the hottest coach in the country with Coach LeClair. I mean, we were on fire at Western, and then he went to East Carolina and just went nuts. I mean, at the time, easily the hottest coach in the country.
Yeah.
Um, like
No, well,
not
excuse me.
even a
That was a
competition.
right, and that was when Florida came calling and different things happened, but God had another plan for Coach LeClair, and that kept him in Greenville during the diagnosis and
Yeah,
treatment of ALS. But you said something a minute ago that kind of resonated with me as well. The term idea, and being a songwriter and a passionate guy like you are. Um, your latest idea, and I don't even know if that's too weak of a word, but the latest passion project, if you will, is you have founded the 723 Foundation, which is your number as a player, and obviously Coach LeClair's number, but have a greater entity called Beat ALS. So in talking with you, this is more than a quote unquote fundraising operation or plan or the ultimate mission is also education, and to ultimately find a way to help to beat ALS. And I'm going to let you talk about it in a second, but I wanted to share with the listeners something that you and I had talked about. This is no disrespect or minimizing any other efforts that are out there. So please, we're trying to create a parallel, not a comparison necessarily. Had Keith LeClair had the platform that Jimmy Valvano had, we would probably be pursuing a cure for ALS at a similar rate that the athletics world pursues the cure for cancer. And that's where the vision of Beat ALS is intended to go. That's the end game, but that all starts with education. Cancer is a one word terrible disease that so many people know they've been impacted. They know directly, yeah, my aunt, my uncle, myself, my has had cancer. ALS has impacted so many more people than they probably even realize, not realizing, was it quote unquote called Lou Gehrig's? Was it called ALS? Was it said by its technical name, which I'll not even try? I'll leave that to you. But talk a little bit about where the 723 Foundation is taking Beat ALS, and literally what as you refer to it, Greenville's the epicenter of the effort and the potential growth. Talk a little bit about where you see this thing going.
Yeah. So I had to get past the numbers mean so much to me. And that was where this thing kind of started with the 7 and 23. You know, Coach Leggett was 7, I was, and then Coach was 23. Coach Leggett and I were at Lamar Hennon, who was Rodney Hennon's dad, head coach at Georgia Southern, played and coached at Western Carolina, and took over for LeClair when he came to East Carolina. But his dad passed away, and Coach Leggett and I were sitting there after the funeral and just having a conversation, and we realized that we both do uh, exercises and workouts and sets of 7s and 23s. And that started something. I was like, you know what? He thinks about him as much as I do, which you do. Tommy Easton does, Eric Backich, Nick Snobble, Cliff, everybody, you know, and that was where the genesis of the 723 Foundation started. And it was initially to honor him and tell his story correctly, and you know, in turn do something for ALS. Moving and learning, more importantly, um, that had to become what you just said. Where you hear the word cancer and you immediately know what that means. Um, we kind of had to get to the point that not everybody, I had to in my head, not everybody's going to know what 723 means without me sitting here telling everything that I'm telling you right now. But when you say ALS, people at least they've heard that sparks their head. They know that's a bad disease. They might not know a ton about it, which is something that we need to alleviate. But Lou Gehrig's disease, you know, it has two names, ALS and Lou Gehrig's disease, and there's a whole baseball connotation there. And so as I've gotten into this world, I really wanted that to become singular. And I've got some really good folks on my team, Mike Sundit and Rob Kramer, that they're like, we have to have something that people immediately know what it is. And that's where Beat ALS came along. And so, you know, this thing started to tell their stories, and it's graduated now and somewhat out of my control. I mean, you'll probably understand this as an athlete and as a coach. We've always tried to control everything that we do. I am like that, not just in athletics, but in sport or in music. I am. You know, I've always worked hard enough. I felt like that I could control the outcomes. And one of the things that, you know, coach found out in the worst way with that diagnosis. You know, here's one of the strongest guys in the world physically. The guy diagnosed with a disease that affects your muscles. It shuts you down, you know, but it doesn't mess with your mind. And that was one of the cruelest things to witness. And so as I've gotten into this, you know, I had a few things. I had a chance meeting with a lady named Stacy Galentine. I was playing in a golf tournament in Nashville and met her. Turns out that her husband played baseball at Winthrop, then moved to Nashville and became an artist. He was part of the Music Mafia with John Rich and, you know, Big and Rich and Gretchen Wilson and all those folks. He was part of that, and then got diagnosed with ALS. When she and I met, she saw me kind of as the extension of what her husband, who is Brian Wayne Galentine, but his stage name was Brian Wayne. And he was instrumental in creating the Lou Gehrig Day in Major League Baseball. And so when I met her, she's like, she saw in me my passion about Coach LeClair, and to do something about this and everything that I had done up until that point. And she's like, I've got to introduce you here, here, and here. And she did that within, you know, like 2 days. And part of that was she introduced me to the Permobile Foundation, which they make the electric chairs that ALS patients are in. Well, it turns out that the rep in North Carolina was the same rep that got Coach LeClair his chair. And they fell in love. They being the Permobile Foundation, they fell in love with the overall story. And we have since entered into a partnership with them to be able to give Permobil chairs away. And so all of a sudden, I went from just telling stories and telling coaches stories and trying to connect the coaching tree and all that stuff to I have a music side of this that has a face and a name. I also have the baseball side of this. And then I have a partner in Permobil that's like, okay, we can actually affect people's day-to-day life and ALS patients' day-to-day life with mobility, with the electric wheelchair. And so all of a sudden I went from not having, a music face to this, but also not really having um, a physical way of doing something for people with ALS. And within a few days, I had that, and that has accelerated everything in my world. And that led to the brainstorming around our what's going to be our marquee event, which is called the Fourth Chair. Um, which is like the songwriter in the round. If people have seen the Bluebird Cafe, it's where songwriters go and they tell the stories around their hits and they do all that. Well, typically that's four songwriters. And so what we're going to do is our marquee fundraising event. And we're going to try and do this all over the place, is we're going to have the fourth chair, which is four chairs up there, but we're only going to have three songwriters, probably myself and two other big hit songwriters. And we're going to tell stories around our songs and all that. Well, that fourth chair is going to stay empty. And that's going to be in honor of Brian Wayne Galentine. And at those things, we're going to give a Permobil chair away to a patient that's from whichever area we're at, and they are in need of that chair. And so as those things started to develop, I looked on, I knew that Western Carolina was coming to play East Carolina. Obviously that's this past weekend. But what a significant time to kind of really start the conversation.
Yeah. Well,
The,
go ahead, buddy. I'm sorry.
no, you're fine. So I thought that it was the most significant time for everybody that is close to the story, whether you're from Cullowhee or you're from Greenville or anywhere in between. The 23rd Keith LeClair Classic with Western Carolina playing East Carolina is significant. There's no two ways around it. And I wanted to be a part of that as best we could. And we were going to give a Permobil chair away, and we weren't able to get the recipient to Greenville in time and all that stuff. But we're going to do that, at the 27 Keith LeClair Classic, if I have anything to do with that, and some things in between. But that's kind of that whole genesis of the 723 Foundation that has kind of turned into we're going to do business as, so to speak, beat ALS. And I love that as a competitor. Just the word beat is something that kind of gets you going. You brought up me talking about Go Cats at the very end of my speech on the field. Which, by the way, that was a huge win for Western in that situation. And East Carolina is going to be just fine. There's talent among talent. But I love the fact that they came out, because on paper that was not supposed to happen.
No, that's right.
And the fact they came out and played the way that they did in that setting was reminiscent of the way that when I was playing at Western, that we would go to Clemson and Georgia Tech and Georgia and Tennessee, and we would show up and we would kick their butts. And we would do that on a van. Most of the time we'd have to change a tire on the way. And, we would go and play for dozens of baseballs so that we had BP balls.
Right.
But we would still go and win. And that was what he embodied. And I think that's what he brought to Greenville. I think that when you talk about the blue collar side of that, it's not just the work ethic mentality, it's the competitive mentality. It's hey, I'm the little guy, but by God, when we get across those lines, you better watch out. And that was who he was as a person, as a player, as a coach, all that stuff. He was intense, dude. And that just resonate when you have a leader like that, that resonates with players, and it is contagious. And I think that Sunday was evidence of what that was with Western. Um, and I hope maybe they'll be able to play in a regional against each other. Who knows?
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
That's the funny thing about baseball is you just never know. And both teams played quite well Sunday. I know Coach Godwin was a little less than happy. It seems like, but he never. No coach likes to win a ball game. But look, man, you and I could sit here and do this until the end of time. We have so many stories, and quite frankly, it's been great just catching up. And I look forward to being whatever part you need me to be in this area. I know this community will get behind it. I think it's really cool that now we're going kind of cresting the hill of saying this is a something we want to remember, a very special person. Now we're saying, okay, we're a little bit pissed off that there's not being enough done to fix this thing, and so now let's make every effort in the world to find a cure, to get the educational and medical treatments in place, and take every swing at beating ALS. And not a better guy to champion the cause than you, man. I again, I love you. I appreciate you, your passion, your ideas, and we're here for you, whatever we need. I will kind of tease, and you started to say it next year. This time next year, we'll be doing a recap of what we plan to have as a very special weekend and a major kind of kicking off point for this effort with Beat ALS.
Absolutely, man. I'm very excited. I think the fact that we've got 23 years of the Keith LeClair Classic. I want to come in and I want to help bring anything and everything. Whether that's media, national sponsors, music integration, and I want to rally the community around the Keith LeClair Classic and do something, help Cliff and help East Carolina and JJ and John, everybody that's involved. I want to help build that up to where it can be the Jimmy V Classic and Coaches for Cancer and stuff that college basketball has. We need that for college baseball. We have a huge network, that the coaching tree embodies. You start talking about those schools, it's Vanderbilt, it's Clemson, it's
Yeah.
Florida, it's Georgia Southern, Western Carolina, East Carolina, Liberty, Cornell, and
Yeah,
Binghamton, and St.
the
John's. It's
roots run
crazy.
deep, no question.
And so I want, I think as a collective effort around that, when we can get all those things pointed, all those guns pointed in the right direction, pointed to, like you said, Greenville being the epicenter. I do think that the Keith LeClair Classic can be that Taj Mahal for us, so to speak, that we build everything else out of from a baseball perspective, and grow the Keith LeClair Classic, but also really start to integrate the community um, around that particular weekend with a lot of really cool events and stuff like that. And I appreciate you. I love you, and I think we're going to do some really good stuff. And if folks are interested, it's 723.foundation is the easiest way to find out more information there. You can always find the same thing on my site, which is mattstillwell.com. Um, and we're in the process of really beginning to tell this story. This interview is going to be a big part of that kickoff part. And we'll be launching our social media and different things moving forward as well. We have other events lined up for this year. And my hope is that we grow and start to tell this story this year, and we look at the 2027 Keith LeClair Classic and that whole weekend as a massive kickoff for us.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you've just joined us on the back end, Matt Stillwell, dear friend of mine, country music recording artist, Keith LeClair, player, played for Coach LeClair, just the roots run deep. 723foundation.org, beat ALS. Big news coming downstream. We'll push it out on social, but circle your calendar. Most of us do every year. Let's look forward to the next Keith LeClair Classic and all the things that surround it. Matty, I appreciate your time, buddy. Again, love you and be safe on your travels. I'll talk to you very soon.
All right, buddy. Thank you, man.